Sla, Antola, get Jeffrey. Hey, I'm Jeffrey Darensbourg of the Atakapa Ishak Nation of Indians, Takapul Ishak, Yukikti. And I'd like to do a short video with you to tell you about Indigenous publishing in Louisiana. The first thing I know that was published about my own tribe was in the 1530s, and it was a memoir by Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca, who was shipwrecked with us in 1528. And he didn't really quite understand what he was doing with us. He accused us of enslaving him simply because we expected him to do the same work as everyone else in the village. His evidence of slavery is that we made him pick ipamia, the parent plant of sweet potatoes, and that to him was too much. It's kind of rich that he would complain about it, since he was very fond of enslaving people. Nevertheless, for a long time in Louisiana's nations, the descriptions of our lives happened from people who were exclusively of European ancestry. And that was true really fairly much until my lifetime. So not very long ago, Indigenous people in Louisiana started publishing our own accounts of our lives and started really talking about our own understandings of ourselves. And this is a big break from the previous narrative. One would never expect to be an expert, say, on French people without reading anything that French people had written and without knowing the language, the French language. And yet people do purport to be experts on Indigenous people who sometimes don't seem to have ever even spoken to us and don't really care what we think about ourselves and don't know our languages and won't listen when we say something about ourselves. But nowadays, sometimes even now, I hear people say, well, we couldn't find any Indigenous people to speak about it, or I couldn't find any writings by Indigenous people. And of course, that's just false. They're just not looking, and they don't care to look because they assume they can tell our stories better than we can, and that is false. So I thought, I'm moving right now, and so I thought I would, just packing up some boxes of books, I found a few books by, or general writings and other books even, by Indigenous people of Louisiana. And I want to share with you some of those. And these are some of the things you could read. Definitely not an exhaustive list, and it's not even all the ones I have, it's just some of the ones in the box I was packing. So let's have a look. First, we have a book that I wrote 2 chapters of, Louisiana Creole Peoplehood. A lot of Indigenous people in Louisiana are in this. This is a book about the mixed heritage of Indigenous people in Louisiana, who are often mixed with African Americans, and which is a legacy of common enslavement and other factors. Really good book that combines contemporary theory of mixed race people and contemporary analysis of Indigenous populations and their mixed status in the United States into the Louisiana context. An earlier work by one of the same authors, Andrew Jolivet, who's a member of the Atakapa Ishak Nation, Louisiana Creoles, Cultural Recovery and Mixed Race Native American Identity, sort of opened this conversation and kind of brought research from people like Jack Forbes into the Louisiana context. Really important book. These are 2 issues of Bobancha Is Still a Place, Indigenous Culture from New Orleans. I am editor who is not a chief of this. It was edited by myself and Ozone 504. And this, I think, is the first ever published anthology of writing and art by Indigenous people in Louisiana. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't think I am. Here's an essay by myself, Bobancha Honoring Indigenous Cultures of the Area in a Single Word, by yours truly. And this is from the Prospect 5 catalog. Prospect is a big arts festival in Louisiana. Really beautiful catalog. Yesterday we said tomorrow. Something that's often at libraries in Louisiana. Brian Klopatek, who's Choctaw, has this great book, Recognition Odysseys, which is about federal recognition status and its complications in Louisiana. Louisiana is the state undoubtedly with the most non-federally recognized tribes, who are tribes that did have extensive diplomatic relationships with other countries, including France and Spain. And very good book that's an introduction to that topic, and it's good in every way a book can be good. The Dummy Line, a narrative by Hubert Singleton, former chief of the Attakapai Ishak, and it's his narrative about growing up in Lake Charles in a neighborhood called the Dummy Line because there was a train line that ran through it that didn't connect to the national network. It was a train line to big people to work in plants and things like that. Really interesting book that I would like to get published with an academic publisher, kind of working on that. Book by my friend Monique Verdun, in collaboration with some other friends of mine, Return to Yakni-Shido, which has some great photographs in it as well. Highly recommend it. A book by a cousin of mine, Smoked Mullet, Cornbread, Crawdad Memory, by Rain Gomez, also known as Rain Prudhomme Cranford. This won a Wordcraft Circle of Native Writers Award. Toledo Res and Other Myths, poems by Thomas Perry, really great book of poetry by a member of the Choctaw Apache tribe of Ebarb, and a book by one of his cousins, Robert C. Caldwell, Choctaw Apache Foodways, not just like a cookbook, but just a great analysis of where the foodways of these indigenous people came from and how it relates to their mixed tribal heritage. A really fantastic analysis. Food is so important for understanding anything in Louisiana, and bravo to Robert for producing such an awesome book. What I consider to be the single best piece of writing about Louisiana Native tribes, and that's really saying a lot, Elizabeth Ellis, The Great Power of Small Nations, Indigenous Diplomacy in the Gulf South, which is really about how indigenous people in the South, in Louisiana and the region, got to be so mixed, the nature of cultural mixing, the nature of enslavement of indigenous people, written with tremendous skill and a ridiculous grasp of archival sources. Highly recommended. I've read it 3 times. Miscegenation Round Dance, which I wrote the preface to, by Rain Prudhomme Cranford. A really great book about poems about disability, mixed identity, really awesome book. John Sitting Bear's The Abigail Tribe of Louisiana. An awesome account of the Abigail, probably the only published account I've seen of the Abigail written by one of them themselves. Recommended, and really a nice narrative. And finally, this is just the last one I had out. This book of stories by Chief Sezostri of the Tunica Biloxi Nation, and some Eagle stories, and then also other stories on the other side. A book to help children. The Tunica Biloxi have produced quite a bit of language learning materials, and that has really helped to lead to a renaissance of their language, and that's really great. So I'm glad for you to come along with me while I'm packing up my stuff and see some of the books by Louisiana natives, and I hope you will get these and others. Remember, no one can tell a group of people's story better than they can tell it themselves, and I hope you remember that, and we'll take the time to, anytime you want to know about an indigenous nation in Louisiana, really take the time to try to see what people in that nation have to say about themselves. Hueo, and have a good day.